In 1982, a string of mysterious deaths in Chicago shook the nation, leaving a trail of empty Tylenol capsules and a killer still at large. The case would go down in history as one of the most bizarre and terrifying crimes in American history, changing the way we think about consumer safety and the packaging of our everyday products. 7 people in the Chicago area died after taking Tylenol capsules laced with potassium cyanide. The victims were ordinary people, with no connection to each other, who had all purchased the same brand of Tylenol from different stores across the city. The only common thread between them was the Tylenol they had taken and the devastating consequences that followed. John Staley, a 27-year-old marketing executive, was the first to die. He had been taking Tylenol for a headache when it suddenly stopped working. His wife found him unresponsive in their bedroom, with empty capsules scattered all over the floor. Over the next few days, 5 more people died under similar circumstances, leaving investigators stunned and struggling to find a motive. The victims were a doctor, a young mother, a businessman, and 3 others, all with no apparent connection to each other. They had all purchased their Tylenol from different stores at different times and had all taken the medication in different locations. It was as if a serial killer was targeting random people, using the same deadly method each time. As the death toll rose, investigators were faced with a daunting task: finding the source of the poisoned Tylenol. They scoured the city, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence, and reviewing security footage. But every lead seemed to end in a dead end, leaving the case to remain a haunting mystery. The investigation was led by the FBI, who worked closely with local authorities to track down the source of the contamination. They analyzed evidence from the capsules, looking for any clues that might lead them to the killer. But every test came back negative, leaving them with more questions than answers. The case sparked a national outcry, with consumers demanding answers from the manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson. The company issued a statement apologizing for the tragedy and promising to take action to prevent such a disaster from happening again. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, the killer remained at large, leaving behind a trail of empty capsules and shattered lives. The Tylenol murders sent shockwaves through the nation, forcing a re-examination of the way we package and distribute consumer products. It led to a major overhaul of safety protocols, with manufacturers scrambling to implement tamper-proof packaging and quality control measures. But the culprit behind the deadly packages was never caught, leaving the case to remain a dark and haunting mystery that continues to fascinate and terrify us to this day. As we delve deeper into the mystery of the Tylenol murders, we'll explore the investigation, the victims, and the aftermath of this tragic event. We'll also examine the impact it had on consumer safety and the packaging industry, and the lingering questions that still surround the case. But for now, let's take a closer look at the victims and the ordinary people who lost their lives to the deadly packages. One of the victims was Mary Kellerman, a 12-year-old girl who died after taking a Tylenol capsule for a headache. Her parents had purchased the medication from a local store, unaware that it was laced with potassium cyanide. Mary's death was a particularly devastating blow, as she was a bright and cheerful young girl who had her whole life ahead of her. Another victim was Adam Janus, a 27-year-old businessman who died after taking a Tylenol capsule. His brother, Stanley Janus, was a nurse who had also taken a Tylenol capsule, but miraculously survived. The brothers were close, and their differing fates added to the mystery and horror of the case. As we explore the lives of these victims, we'll see the human side of this tragedy and the devastating impact it had on their families and loved ones. We'll also examine the investigation and the challenges faced by the authorities as they tried to track down the killer. But for now, let's take a closer look at the investigation and the steps taken to catch the culprit. The investigation was a massive undertaking involving hundreds of investigators and experts. They scoured the city, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence, and reviewing security footage. They also tested the capsules, looking for any clues that might lead them to the killer. But every test came back negative, leaving them with more questions than answers. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, the killer remained at large, leaving behind a trail of empty capsules and shattered lives. The case continued to fascinate and terrify the nation, with many people wondering how such a tragedy could have occurred. But for those affected by the tragedy, the question was not how, but who. The question of who was behind the deadly packages remains a haunting mystery to this day. Despite a massive investigation, the killer was never caught, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a nation in shock. But as we continue to explore this case, we'll see the impact it had on consumer safety and the packaging industry, and the lingering questions that still surround the case. In the next section, we'll examine the impact of the Tylenol murders on consumer safety and the packaging industry. We'll see how the tragedy led to a major overhaul of safety protocols and the implementation of tamper-proof packaging and quality control measures. But for now, let's take a closer look at the aftermath of the tragedy and the lives of those affected by it. The aftermath of the Tylenol murders was a difficult and emotional time for the victims' families and loved ones. They were left to pick up the pieces, trying to make sense of a senseless tragedy. The investigation continued, but the killer remained at large, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a nation in shock. As we continue to explore this case, we'll see the human side of this tragedy and the devastating impact it had on the victims and their families. We'll also examine the impact it had on consumer safety and the packaging industry, and the lingering questions that still surround the case. But for now, let's take a closer look at the impact on the victims' families and the emotional toll the tragedy took on them. The victims' families were left to cope with the loss of their loved ones, trying to make sense of a senseless tragedy. They were shocked and outraged by the news and struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The investigation continued, but the killer remained at large, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a nation in shock. As we explore the aftermath of the Tylenol murders, we'll see the human side of this tragedy and the devastating impact it had on the victims and their families. We'll also examine the impact it had on consumer safety and the packaging industry, and the lingering questions that still surround the case. But for now, let's take a closer look at the impact on the community and the ways in which the tragedy affected the people of Chicago. The Tylenol murders had a profound impact on the community, leaving a lasting legacy of fear and uncertainty. People were shocked and outraged by the news and struggled to make sense of a senseless tragedy. The investigation continued, but the killer remained at large, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a nation in shock. As we continue to explore this case, we'll see the impact it had on consumer safety and the packaging industry, and the lingering questions that still surround the case. We'll also examine the ways in which the tragedy affected the people of Chicago and the community's response to the crisis. But for now, let's take a closer look at the impact on the packaging industry and the ways in which the tragedy led to a major overhaul of safety protocols. The packaging industry was forced to re-examine its safety protocols in the wake of the Tylenol murders. manufacturers scrambled to implement tamper-proof packaging and quality control measures in an effort to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. The investigation revealed a number of flaws in the packaging process, including inadequate quality control and a lack of tamper-proof packaging. As we explore the impact of the Tylenol murders on the packaging industry, we'll see the ways in which the tragedy led to a major overhaul of safety protocols. We'll also examine the implementation of tamper-proof packaging and quality control measures and the impact it had on consumer safety. But for now, let's take a closer look at the implications of the tragedy and the ways in which it continues to shape our understanding of consumer safety and the packaging industry. The Tylenol murders had a profound impact on our understanding of consumer safety and the packaging industry. The tragedy highlighted the importance of quality control and tamper-proof packaging and led to a major overhaul of safety protocols. The investigation revealed a number of flaws in the packaging process, including inadequate quality control and a lack of tamper-proof packaging. As we continue to explore this case, we'll see the lasting legacy of the tragedy and the ways in which it continues to shape our understanding of consumer safety and the packaging industry. We'll also examine the impact it had on consumer confidence and the ways in which it continues to affect the packaging industry today. But for now, let's take a closer look at the case and the lingering questions that still surround it. As the bodies piled up, the FBI launched a massive investigation, but the killer seemed to be always one step ahead. It was September 29, 1982, and the city of Chicago was in a state of panic. 7 people had died, all within a span of just a few weeks, and all had a peculiar connection. They had all taken Tylenol capsules that had been tampered with. At the center of the investigation was the Federal Bureau of Investigation, led by their top man, Special Agent Paul O'Hara. O'Hara was no stranger to high-profile cases, but this one was different. The lack of a clear motive, combined with the seemingly random nature of the victims, made it a puzzle unlike any other. The FBI collected evidence from the crime scenes, including the empty Tylenol capsules and a suspicious piece of evidence from one of the victims' homes. It was a small, seemingly insignificant item, a piece of adhesive tape, but it would prove to be a crucial clue in the investigation. As the agents dug deeper, they began to uncover a pattern. The killer seemed to be targeting people who had no connection to each other. There was Mary Kellerman, a 12-year-old girl who had taken a Tylenol capsule to alleviate a headache. There was Stanley and Teresa Lapp, an elderly couple who had both taken the medication. And there were 4 others, all of whom had died under similar circumstances. But what really caught the FBI's attention was the way the killer seemed to be always one step ahead of them. It was as if the murderer had a plan that involved swapping the Tylenol capsules with poisoned ones. The FBI's experts analyzed the evidence, and it seemed to point to this theory. But how did the killer manage to avoid detection? The investigation revealed that the killer may have used a clever tactic to evade capture. They may have targeted stores that still had the old packaging on their shelves. The killer would then swap the Tylenol capsules with the poisoned ones, making it look like the crime was committed at the source. But was this just a clever ruse, or was there something more sinister at play? As the FBI continued to investigate, they were met with a daunting challenge: the lack of a clear motive. Why had the killer targeted these specific individuals? Was it a case of random chance? Or was there a deeper connection that the agents had yet to uncover? The investigation was a complex web of clues and theories with no clear direction. But one thing was certain: the killer was still out there, and they were not going to stop until they struck again. The FBI was racing against time to catch the perpetrator, but the question on everyone's mind was, would they be able to solve the case before it was too late? The investigation was a cat-and-mouse game, with the killer always staying one step ahead of the agents. But the FBI was determined to catch them, no matter what it took. They were working around the clock, following every lead, every tip, every shred of evidence. And slowly but surely, they were starting to get somewhere. But just as it seemed like they were closing in on the killer, they hit a roadblock. The evidence was circumstantial, and they couldn't quite pinpoint the identity of the perpetrator. It was a frustrating setback, but the FBI refused to give up. They were convinced that they were on the right track, and they were determined to see it through to the end. As the investigation continued, the nation was on edge. The people of Chicago were living in fear, wondering if they would be the next victim. The media was sensationalizing the story, making it a national spectacle, and the FBI was under pressure to deliver a solution. But in the midst of all the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. A glimmer that the killer might finally be caught, that the case might be solved. And it all started with a tiny piece of evidence, a small, seemingly insignificant item that would change the course of the investigation forever. The investigation was a complex puzzle, with many pieces yet to be found. But the FBI was determined to solve it, no matter what it took. They were racing against time, following every lead, every tip, every shred of evidence. And slowly but surely, they were starting to get somewhere. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, the investigation continued to unfold. The FBI was working tirelessly to catch the killer, but the question on everyone's mind was, would they be able to solve the case before it was too late? The nation was holding its breath, waiting for the verdict, and the FBI was determined to deliver. In the wake of the Tylenol murders, the U.S. government was forced to take action, and a new era of tamper-proof packaging was born. As the investigation into the Chicago murders continued, the nation was left grappling with a disturbing question. What could be done to prevent such a tragedy from happening again? Regulatory agencies, including the Food and Drug Administration, sprang into action. The FDA, tasked with ensuring the safety of food and drugs, had a responsibility to address the crisis. In a matter of weeks, the agency implemented new safety measures, including tamper-evident packaging and stricter quality control. These changes were made in response to public outcry and pressure from lawmakers. The public was outraged, and lawmakers were quick to respond. Senate hearings were held, and legislation was proposed to address the issue. The result was the passage of new federal regulations mandating tamper-proof packaging for all medications. One of the key figures in this effort was Senator Orrin Hatch, a Republican from Utah. Hatch was a strong advocate for consumer safety, and he played a crucial role in shaping the new regulations. In his testimony before Congress, Hatch emphasized the need for swift action. "The public is losing confidence in the safety of our food and drug supply," he said. "We must take immediate action to restore that confidence." The new packaging standards were not without controversy, however. Some manufacturers argued that the added security measures would be too expensive to implement, and that they would compromise the aesthetic appeal of their products. But in the face of public pressure and congressional pressure, the industry ultimately relented. The new packaging standards became the new norm, but the question remained, would they be enough to prevent similar crimes in the future? The answer, of course, was a resounding maybe. While the new packaging standards did reduce the risk of tampering, they did not eliminate it entirely. As one expert noted, the new packaging standards were a step in the right direction, but they were not a magic bullet. tampering can still occur, and it's up to manufacturers, regulators, and consumers to stay vigilant. In the years that followed, the nation was shaken by another series of mysterious poisonings. In 1986, 7 people in California died after taking extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been deliberately laced with cyanide. The case was eerily similar to the 1982 Chicago murders, and it highlighted the ongoing threat of tampering. Despite these setbacks, the new packaging standards remained in place, and they have continued to evolve over the years. Today, tamper-proof packaging is the norm, and it's a testament to the power of public pressure and congressional action. But the legacy of the Tylenol murders remains a cautionary tale, reminding us that even in the face of tragedy, there is always the potential for change and improvement. As we continue to navigate the complex landscape of consumer safety, it's worth remembering the words of Senator Hatch. The public is the ultimate judge of our performance. If we fail to protect them, we fail as a society. The Tylenol murders may have been a devastating tragedy, but they also sparked a national conversation about consumer safety and the importance of vigilance. In the end, the true cost of the Tylenol murders was not just the 7 lives lost, but the countless hours of fear and anxiety that were endured by the families and loved ones of the victims. It's a reminder that the consequences of tampering can be far-reaching and devastating, and that we must always stay vigilant in our pursuit of consumer safety. As we look to the future, it's clear that the memory of the Tylenol murders will continue to shape our understanding of consumer safety and the importance of tamper-proof packaging. But it's also a reminder that the story of the Tylenol murders is far from over. It's a story that continues to unfold, with new challenges and new opportunities emerging every day. In the next section, we'll explore the ongoing impact of the Tylenol murders and the ways in which the tragedy has influenced consumer safety policy. From the development of new packaging technologies to the growth of online marketplaces, we'll examine the ways in which the Tylenol murders have left an indelible mark on our society. As the investigation continued, a new suspect emerged. But was it a case of mistaken identity or a clever ploy to throw off the authorities? James William Lewis, a man with a troubled past, was beginning to gain attention from the FBI. His involvement in the Tylenol murders was shrouded in mystery. But one thing was clear. Lewis had a history of making demands for ransom. Lewis was a disgruntled employee of Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Tylenol. It was a job he had held for several years, but his tenure was marked by tension and conflict. Colleagues described him as intense and volatile, often clashing with his superiors over trivial matters. But it was Lewis's obsession with the company that would ultimately lead him to the forefront of the investigation. In the aftermath of the Tylenol murders, Lewis began making phone calls to Johnson & Johnson, claiming to be the killer. He demanded a ransom of $1 million in exchange for information about the crime. The company, desperate to understand the motives behind the tragedy, initially considered Lewis's claims. However, as the investigation progressed, it became clear that Lewis's alibi for the time of the murders was shaky at best. The FBI was skeptical of Lewis's involvement, but they couldn't shake off the feeling that he was hiding something. Agents interviewed his friends and family, but none of them seemed to know much about his involvement in the Tylenol murders. Lewis's own statements about the crime were inconsistent, and he seemed to be manipulating the investigators to get what he wanted. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the FBI continued to investigate Lewis. They discovered that he had a history of extortion and blackmail, and his motives for making the ransom demands seemed clear. But as they dug deeper, they realized that the evidence against Lewis was circumstantial at best. There was no smoking gun, no clear connection between Lewis and the Tylenol murders. The investigation into Lewis's involvement continued for months, but ultimately, the evidence was inconclusive. The FBI was left with more questions than answers, and the case against Lewis remained a mystery. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Lewis was not the only suspect, and the true identity of the Tylenol killer remained a secret. The Lewis case highlighted the complexities of the Tylenol investigation. It was a cat-and-mouse game between the killer and the authorities, with new twists and turns emerging every day. The FBI was working tirelessly to unravel the mystery, but the killer seemed to be always one step ahead. As the city of Chicago continued to grapple with the aftermath of the Tylenol murders, the question on everyone's mind remained: who was responsible for this heinous crime? The investigation into the Tylenol murders would go on to become one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history. The case against James William Lewis was a mere footnote in the larger narrative, a reminder that the truth was often more complicated than it seemed. As the years went by, the Tylenol murders would become a cautionary tale about the dangers of tampering with consumer products. But the identity of the killer would remain a mystery, a testament to the complexities of the human mind. The search for answers would continue, but for now, the Tylenol murders remained a dark and troubled chapter in American history. A chapter that would forever change the way we think about consumer safety and the importance of vigilance in the face of danger. 30 years after the fact, the killer's identity remains a mystery, but what do we know about the crime and the motivations behind it? The Chicago Tylenol murders, a case that shocked the nation, left behind a trail of unanswered questions. As the investigation unfolded, a complex web of events and circumstances emerged, pointing to a sophisticated plan to evade detection. The killer's modus operandi, or MO, was a masterclass in avoiding detection. By switching the Tylenol capsules with poisoned ones, the perpetrator created a situation where it seemed like an isolated incident rather than a coordinated attack. This level of planning raises questions about the killer's motive and potential connections to the victims. Were they random targets, or were there underlying factors that made them vulnerable to the poison? The FBI's efforts to crack the case were hindered by the lack of a clear motive and the fact that the victims had no connection to each other. The investigation revealed a labyrinthine network of potential leads, each one yielding more questions than answers. As the agents delved deeper, they encountered a trail of red herrings, dead ends, and misdirection. The killer seemed to have anticipated every move the authorities made, always staying one step ahead. One of the most intriguing aspects of the case is the absence of a clear motive. Why would someone go to such extremes to kill 7 people in a seemingly random manner? Theories have ranged from a madman's vendetta to a calculated attempt to create a sense of panic. However, the truth remains elusive, leaving investigators and experts alike to speculate. The Chicago Tylenol murders remain one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in U.S. history, with many questions still unanswered. The case has become a benchmark for investigators, highlighting the challenges of solving crimes that involve sophisticated planning and a lack of motive. As we continue to grapple with the complexities of this case, one thing is certain: the killer's identity remains a mystery, and the truth may never be fully revealed. The legacy of the Tylenol murders extends beyond the crime itself, influencing the way we approach safety and security in everyday life. The Tamper-Evident packaging that was introduced as a result of the tragedy has become a standard feature in many consumer products. However, the case also serves as a reminder that no matter how advanced our technology and investigatory techniques become, there will always be crimes that defy explanation. As we reflect on the Chicago Tylenol murders, we are left with a sense of unease and uncertainty. The case has become a cultural touchstone, representing the darker side of human nature. It serves as a reminder that even in the most unlikely of circumstances, evil can strike without warning, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions. The Tylenol murders may never be fully solved, but their impact on our collective psyche is undeniable. They serve as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the need for continued innovation in the pursuit of safety and security. As we move forward, we are left to ponder the what-ifs and the maybes, forever trapped in the labyrinth of unanswered questions that surround this infamous case. The lasting impact. How the Tylenol murders changed America. The Tylenol murders had a profound impact on the way we live our lives today. From the way we package our medications to the way we approach security and safety. If you think about it, the next time you pick up a bottle of pills or take a bite of food, you might not realize the significance of the events that led to the changes in packaging and regulations. But the truth is, the Tylenol murders of 1982 were a wake-up call for the entire nation, and their effects are still being felt today. One of the most significant changes that came out of the Tylenol murders was the introduction of tamper-evident packaging. You've probably seen it before. The plastic or foil wrapping that covers the cap of a medication bottle. It's designed to prevent someone from opening the bottle without leaving a visible sign. But what you might not know is that this type of packaging was largely non-existent before the Tylenol murders. In fact, many medications were sold in simple cardboard boxes or paper wrappers. The Tylenol murders changed all that. The pharmaceutical industry was forced to take a hard look at its practices and procedures. Companies began to invest heavily in new packaging technologies, including the development of tamper-evident materials and security features like holograms and serial numbers. Today, it's not uncommon to see medications packaged in elaborate high-security containers that make it virtually impossible for someone to tamper with them without leaving evidence. But the impact of the Tylenol murders went beyond just packaging. The case also raised awareness about the importance of food and product safety. In the wake of the murders, food manufacturers and regulatory agencies began to take a closer look at their practices and procedures. New regulations and standards were put in place to ensure that products were safer for consumers. Today, we see the effects of these changes in everything from government inspections to labeling requirements. The Tylenol murders also served as a wake-up call for the pharmaceutical industry and regulatory agencies. They highlighted the need for greater vigilance and accountability in the industry. Today, companies are held to much higher standards when it comes to product safety and security. They're required to report any adverse events and to take steps to prevent them from happening in the first place. As we look back on the events of 1982, it's clear that the Tylenol murders had a profound impact on the way we live our lives today. From the way we package our medications to the way we approach security and safety, the effects of the Tylenol murders are still being felt. But the case also raises questions about the future. What other changes can we expect as a result of advancements in technology and changes in consumer behavior? And how will we continue to adapt to the ever-evolving landscape of product safety and security? The answers to these questions are complex, but one thing is certain. The Tylenol murders were a turning point in American history, and their impact will be felt for years to come. As we reflect on the Tylenol murders, what can we learn from this tragic event? And how can we apply those lessons to our own lives and society? The case may be 40 years old, but its impact on our collective psyche remains profound. It's a reminder that even the most seemingly secure systems can be vulnerable to manipulation and sabotage. The Tylenol murders highlight the importance of vigilance and awareness in preventing crimes and ensuring public safety. In an era of heightened security measures, it's surprising that such a heinous crime could occur in the first place. Yet, it serves as a stark reminder that complacency can be a deadly sin. The Tylenol murders also demonstrate the need for greater accountability and regulation in the pharmaceutical industry. At the time, the company that manufactured Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson, was lauded for its swift response to the crisis. However, the incident also exposed the lack of safeguards in place to prevent such an event from occurring. In the years that followed, the pharmaceutical industry has undergone significant changes with a greater emphasis on product safety and tamper-proof packaging. Yet, the Tylenol murders remain a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the importance of regulatory oversight. The case serves as a reminder of the enduring power of human curiosity and the importance of seeking answers to life's biggest questions. Despite the passage of time, the Tylenol murders continue to fascinate and horrify us in equal measure. We are drawn to the mystery and intrigue surrounding the case, and the fact that the killer was never caught. It's a reminder that even the most seemingly unsolvable crimes can have a profound impact on our collective psyche. As we continue to grapple with the complexities of human nature, the Tylenol murders offer a sobering reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all. The Tylenol murders remain one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in U.S. history, but their impact on our lives and society continues to be felt today. In the years since the incident, the way we package and distribute medications has undergone a significant transformation. The introduction of tamper-evident packaging, for example, has become a standard feature in the pharmaceutical industry. This change has not only improved the safety of medications, but has also raised awareness about the importance of food and product safety. The Tylenol murders have also served as a wake-up call for the pharmaceutical industry and regulatory agencies, highlighting the need for greater vigilance and accountability. As we look back on the Tylenol murders, we are reminded that even the most seemingly intractable problems can be addressed through a combination of determination, innovation, and a commitment to public safety. The case may be a relic of the past, but its lessons continue to resonate with us today. It's a powerful reminder that we must always be vigilant and proactive in the face of adversity, and that even the smallest actions can have a profound impact on the world around us.